All right, guys, let's get started. We've got a few more submissions here. Coming to the end, I know that our deadline here will be Friday for this open review. So if you haven't submitted yet, make sure you get your track up there so I can give you some feedback. All right, first up, Asher. Here's a funk track I've been working on. All right, let's see what you got going on here. So far, the vibe is pretty cool. I like where it's going. I like the building up. Drums feel a bit complex for a funk song. It's kind of almost feeling like a progressive rock drum track because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with the double kick pedal. And just feels really busy going on. And usually with funk, it's more about a groove, just getting into a cool, just something kind of a cool hip hop funky groove and kind of staying in the pocket, obviously with your cool fills here and there. But it just feels like it's a little bit too... I guess complicated, just especially in the drums. They're just feeling like there's a lot going on here. It's taking it away from the funk style, kind of going more into a progressive lane. Be careful, there's some of these accents, I like what you're doing with them, but they feel a little bit rough. Like that second da-da-da-dun, that second one felt a little bit ahead of the beat, so just double check your timing here. Same there, a little bit of a, I think either with the drums or with those horn stabs, something was a little bit off there in terms of timing. So we're feeling a little bit repetitive here, and also just generally, even though the track has different parts, I don't feel like it's telling a unique or a focused story. It just feels like part A, part B, part C, part D, and they're just kind of linked together. But, which part is the verse, which part is the chorus, which part is kind of a little resting point, which part's going to rise us back up. It's kind of all feeling a little bit of the same energy-wise. So I think we need to have a little bit more of a dynamic story being told here. Get a groove going, build it up, and then boom, have a big, with all the horns, that's kind of the chorus. Bring us back down, have a focused second verse or a bridge, a breakaway part, and then rise us back up, maybe have a build up. But right now it kind of feels like all these little different Lego parts are just kind of being jammed together. So not exactly telling a story moving forward. Definitely timing issues there with that turnaround. Be careful with that. Timing issues there. There's timing issues all over the place here. This is some fundamental stuff. Get into quantizing, making sure your loops or your MIDI tracks, everything is really synced up, especially with kind of a funky swing sound. You really got to be careful with this stuff. Double check things. Ooh. Bum. We got to go to that last chord. I mean, you kind of left the singing there. Bum, bum, tss, and then it just kind of fell off the table. Got to give us that last impactful right to the root chord. Satisfactory ending. Always got to give that satisfactory hit ending at the end. Mix is not so bad. I would say you could probably get a little bit more aggressive with your master. It could go a little bit louder, just volume-wise. But, you know, the samples sound good. Everything is kind of well balanced. I think it's just more structuring the track so it, like I said before, it has a little bit more of a flow, a little bit more of a dynamic flow, and it's kind of telling more of a musical story rather than just this section and that section and this section all just jammed together. So certainly on the right track, but a little bit more work for this one for sure, to get it on par with the licensable stuff out there. All right. Dejan, aiming on TV tension with this one. I'll be honest, I didn't use a reference track. I know I should and almost always do, but this time I was testing myself to see if I can make a good, useful piece with that. All right, let's see what you got going on. Already off the bat, there's one thing just emotion tone-wise, I'm not exactly sure where it's going. In the beginning, it kind of felt more comedy. You know, it was kind of like somebody sneaking around, but then there's also kind of a dark tension in here. So you're kind of doing comedy and tension, which doesn't really exactly work out. It's probably too far away of a gap to be able to fill those two into one track. So I think it needs more focus in terms of, are you going to go more comedy or are you going to go more in tension? So that's definitely in the tone department what I think needs to be fixed. Secondly, the low end of the mix is almost non-existent. When the drums came in, there was a little bit of a kick there, but with those little plucked strings, like those really need to have a nice warm low boom, 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 or maybe you need to add another low bass pluck, something down there, because the mix feels like it's very top heavy. It doesn't have a lot of weight underneath, kind of putting it together. Probably need some more transitional elements, you know, like where you're kind of going with that, a nice tension, holding it, and then, but we got to have a whoosh or a crash or an impact, something to give us that release now into this next section. So a little bit more transitional work. This last section feels the most focused. Like this is tension. This is definitely driving. I think just take down those little wood block sounds. They kind of are a little bit dominating in the mix. They need to come down a bit. But this really feels focused. It feels together. The mix is good. The drums are driving. So this really feels like a tension track. Previously in the track, it was, again, halfway in and out of comedy. So I don't think the, going on your own without a reference track on this one quite worked out there. I would say what I would do is start with this section. This would be basically your main focus. Build an entire build-up up until this last section. That seems to be where this track wants to go, because this just feels like the most put-together side of it. And maybe have a crash at the end, dun, dun, boom, something a little bit more impactful right there, rather than just kind of ending it. It just sounds a little bit more not as satisfactory unless we have some sort of an impact there, maybe a crash cymbal. So yeah, a little bit of work in the focus department, definitely. Sounds are pretty good, not too many complaints on that. Just getting a little bit more low end, rich low end, especially with those plucking strings. You really got to have that with minimal or tension music. It's really all about that low end that really drives the pulse of these kind of tracks. Almost think of like a heartbeat. That's the kind of feeling and the sound, not necessarily that rhythm, but just that presence in your track needs to be there, especially for tension, because it needs to get people on the edge of their seat, and those low driving pulses can really help do that. So a little bit of work to do there, but definitely moving in the right direction. All right, David, this is a hip-hop orchestral hybrid I recently created. Looking forward to your input. All right, let's take a listen. So the first thing I already noticed, your kick has a click at the beginning of it. You need to either use a fade in to get rid of that That kind of, it almost sounds like the mix is blowing out or something, but it's just, it doesn't feel right. So either you need to fade in all of those kick samples or find a new kick sample, something that doesn't have that click sound in the beginning, because it sounds like an audio file form coming in, and like an abrupt edit, so it doesn't sound very musical. So just be aware, the first thing that's definitely going to be a big pushback for you is this is very slow, it's dragging, it's kind of tired sounding. These kind of tracks just don't get a lot of placements on TV. Go watch TV. If you don't believe me, go watch TV. Listen to what you're hearing. You're going to hear mid-tempo, up-tempo, energetic, exciting, party, right? Celebration, or even if it's tension or something a little bit more dark, it's going to have a lot more tempo to it. It's a little faster tempo. It's going to have more energy. It's going to be feeling like it's picking up more. Also in hip hop, you got to have a much heavier hitting kick. So this kick is just kind of there, but with hip hop, it's all about, you got to make your subs basically in your car kind of blow out a little bit. So you got to have a lot more aggression on your drums here, because these drums feel way too timid for a proper like hip hop sound. And I know you're going for sort of the hip hop, the rock sound. I think that you said rock, right? Hip hop orchestral. Okay, it's not rock. So I can see that with the piano, but it's still just a little bit tired, a little bit slow. Beautiful music, but if you're going to be putting in time to making a catalog for yourself, why not make music that will get more placements or likely to get more placements? And just these slower ones, they don't do as much. Feel like there's some sort of a phasing. Something is like, it was weird. All of a sudden, my ears feel like they should have been on opposite sides of me. And usually when you get this kind of weird feeling like that, there's a phase issue. So you might want to double check some of your plugins if you have some phase or something enabled here, especially with the piano. I think it's the piano doing it. Again, same thing with this verse or hook. It's bigger than the verse, but it's just slow, it's draggy, it's not, it's just not pushing forward. And you just got to have a little bit more momentum in your tracks if you want to be considered. In fact, now I'm listening, it might have just been that kind of distorted guitar thing you have going on there. That might be giving me a little bit of a kind of weird sound. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that sound. It just sounded very kind of like just plastic. It just didn't feel very heavy or authentic or real. So it just kind of had this sort of like cheap distortion sound to it. So I would probably get a different, if you're going to get a big heavy distortion or something like that, maybe consider horns or a different guitar sound, something different. That just didn't quite deliver, I think, the seriousness that maybe you probably wanted it to do. So for these kind of transitions like here, where you had this just little hi-hat fill, that's not going to cut it for a transition in the licensing business. You are going to have to swoosh it up and then land us in the verse, or maybe just right from your chorus, you go to rise us up and then boom, land us right into the chorus. But just stopping the chorus and then boom. I don't know, just not enough there to kind of tell the story and keep the momentum moving forward. It feels like we stop, had this kind of small little fill, and then we start the verse. So it's not continuously and flowing through the music that way. So I think just getting a little bit more practice on working through transitions. Plenty of tutorials here in Sync Academy you can check out about how we craft transitions. Just type in transitions in the tutorial section. You'll find a lot of them. You also need something in the low end in terms of music. I mean, we have the kick, the drums, obviously, and the high piano. but there's like nothing right here to kind of like chords basically, or a horn or something that just kind of takes that mid-low section and pushes us forward melodically. So this feels like incomplete, like this is kind of still demo form. And at the end of our tracks, we usually want to crescendo them into the biggest part of it. So here would be not exactly what you do in the licensing business, where you have this quieter kind of verse and then it just sort of trails out. You want to actually end with a big chorus. So you would probably, repeat a chorus and then add something to it, so it's a little different than the first one, and then at the very end of that chorus, rise this up, and then boom. That's how you usually end tracks in the licensing business. You don't want to go to something a little bit more quiet. Usually at the end, you want to have that crescendo all the way through. So a little bit more work for sure. Definitely find some reference tracks. I would definitely recommend that for you. Find a hip-hop orchestral track that you feel is, wow, that's like top level, that's top shelf stuff. I want to get there. And follow it. Literally follow in the footsteps of it. My recent YouTube video talks all about this. Definitely watch that video if you haven't. It's going to serve you very well, I can guarantee you. All right, Michael. Last but not least, I would love to get some feedback from you on a recent track I did for Sync 60. It's a collab with another person that plays guitar. It probably fit in the rock orchestral. All right. Let's see what you got going on here. Okay, so the energy is good. I like how you start the track, you're building it, you got all that stuff going on. Couple of issues with the mix. Drums are really loud and they have a big kind of room reverb sound to them, so they're really kind of sucking all the life out of the mix, and everything else is getting pushed away, and it's really, most of all I'm hearing is just these drums, which they sound good, they're good samples, but they're way too hot. Maybe a little bit of that reverb can come down a bit. It just needs to be a little bit more punchy and less dominating in the mix. Secondly, the guitars are very quiet as well. The lead I can definitely hear, but you had some low rhythm guitars. Those need to be boosted up, and maybe just taking down your drums, they would just naturally be a little bit more audible, because they're almost not even in the track. I can barely hear them in there, but I know that they are serving a really important purpose, so you probably want to have those bumped up a little bit more and bring those drums down. And that low kind of pulsing synth, dum, 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 that also needs to be a lot more. I need to feel that punching through the mix more, a little bit lower, dum, 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 almost like it feels like a little bit of a kind of a machine gun kind of hitting you in the gut a little bit. So that needs to have a little bit more punch, especially on the low end. So here's the temptation that a lot of, especially as you, a guitar player, or the one that I think you said you collaborate with a guitar player, this is now becoming just a huge solo piece, right? You had soloing going on here, now you have another solo. Let's take a break from the guitar. We don't need to have this much solo going on in a piece. A solo should be just a little feature. Here's a cool little solo part of the guitar, rock and roll, all that good stuff. Now let's take it away. Let's go somewhere else. Let's give it a break and let something else take the lead. So you had this other cool stuff going on here, I think with the strings. Again, see, now you have two leads going on. You have this kind of cool high synth or string lead going on, and then you have this guitar lead. They're right in the same register. They're playing on top of each other. What do you see when you have or what can you hear when you have that much stuff all together? Nothing. It just starts to sound like noise. A lot of stuff happening up there, so you lose focus of your mix. So give something a spot. Like if the guitar solo is going to be the solo, it's going to be the lead. Give it its due. Give it its time. Then get it out of the way. Let's bring something else in. Or you could do call and response back and forth. But they definitely need to be taking turns, getting out of each other's way for sure. this vocal thing you had going on here and also there, it feels like it's a little bit off time, and it's just kind of strange. It's just out of the blue, it's there, and then we don't hear it again. So I would probably just take that out. It seems like that's probably not the right choice for a transitional effect in this track. So right there, it's like we should have transitioned. It's like we were transitioning here, and then we just kind of kept going with this lower transition. So it felt like that was the rise, this cool guitar solo, and it's getting real gnarly and cool. And then we should have whooshed up to something big, probably this last chorus here. So the transition here feels a little bit awkward, that we rise up and then we just kind of fall down again to come up. So the only way that you could probably do something like that usually works is you rise up, just a quick little false start, and then go right back into your chorus. But this is probably not quite the structure that would work so well. I like the intensity of this last chorus. What I don't like is it's so short. I mean, we just got into it, and I'm like starting to feel it, starting to groove, it's starting to deliver something, and then it's gone, right? So it's like you teased us, you gave us a little bit of this nice candy at the end, like, nope, you don't get the whole thing. So this at least needs to be twice as long, this last chorus, and you can build it. Maybe you could be this 4 times as long. You could actually, if you can develop enough changes along the way, this could be a massive, monumental, epic end to your track. And you obviously have some more time you can play with. It's only at 2 minutes here, so a little bit more stretching needs to be going on there. So certainly energy is good. The focus, the emotional focus is certainly there. But yeah, just some placing issues, and obviously with the mix, the issues that I pointed out there. Those are some things that definitely just keep in mind moving forward. So let me make sure, did I miss anybody? We only had 4? I thought we had 5 today. Let me do a little refresh here. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody if somebody did post one there. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we had 2 more here. There we go. Okay, well, Groove, you actually caught on to this one. So, okay, Christina, aim to make a rebel female empowerment bank robbery Tarantino style track with a modern EDM touch. All right, sounds interesting. Let's see what you
do. We can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want.
So I like the vibe of it. It's got an interesting sound, and definitely I think you're nailing what you went for, which is like, it is actually more, I'm thinking now it's appropriate for corporate commercials, like advertising campaigns. This is absolutely right up their alley. One thing though is there's a lot of compression in your mix. Your vocals feel like they're just being squeezed through a tube of toothpaste. I don't feel like I'm in the room with you or getting a little bit. I know you have this kind of cool effect with your voice, but even with that effect, I think you can ease off on the compression settings a bit so it doesn't feel so squashed, because you're like losing the life of your voice out of it. It's just squeezing all the life out of it, and it feels like a block, just a really compressed, hard, just a audio file kind of coming through. Same thing with the mix. The mix also feels very like everything was pushed down here, and then you kind of put up the volume. So I'm not feeling the impact, like the kick, the drums, like that stuff's not really pushing me as much as it definitely could be. Secondly, I like that you double timed here. You're kind of going a little bit more 4 on the floor. We needed a little bit more of a transitional or a build up section like that, though. It felt like we just were going from the slow tempo to the fast tempo. I feel like we need more of a transition there, maybe a build up, maybe some swooshes, sound effects, something like that. Or when we go, for this big chorus part, we need to have some more stereo imaging going on, maybe some shakers or something that kind of comes out really far out left and right. So we kind of now like, okay, we've arrived at a chorus, right? So it needs a little bit more of differentiation from the previous part. And those distorted, chopped and screwed vocals you have are really cool. They're really loud though, and they're a little bit harsh because they have that little frequency, and you've probably EQ'd the low and the high end out of them. So what you're doing is squeezing all of them into this little mid-upper range, and that is really, really piercing. So just be careful with that, especially when you have it this loud in the mix. It really starts to just attack the listener more than kind of add to the track.
We can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. Oh, 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 oh.
Before we go to the next part, I personally would have probably rewritten or done something new for the second verse here. I think this is a verse. It sounds kind of like a verse to me. We've kind of heard that before. If they want to take this first part and redo it or loop it, they can do that. So I almost think you should do something a little bit different here. Even if it's just replacing one word or just replacing the melody just a little bit, just add a little bit more variation, especially in the licensing world. You want to give them these options as we go through your track. Same thing with that transition. We need a more of a, maybe even drop the music out, have a cool drum feel. You know, it kind of feels now we're in a chorus. So just a little bit more of a setup for I've maybe turned down that little bit of arpeggiated synth, you know, that kind of like twittering, you know, thing that's going on up there. It's a bit repetitive. It's kind of hovering on the same note for a long time, and it's in that high frequency range. Same thing. It's kind of attacking a little bit. So maybe duck that down a bit. Maybe curve out some of those EQs a little bit. One thing that I think, especially if you want to go into that Tarantino vibe, getting that guitar, you know, that kind of slightly distorted, boom, 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 you know, just kind of like a single note line here and there, will definitely, I think, add to this track. I think you need a little bit of that guitar feel that will get it a little further. The EDM thing is kind of cool, but it feels almost a little bit disconnected from what you're doing with your vocals. I think if you threw a guitar in there, that would kind of bridge between the EDM sound and your cool vocals, your Tarantino style vocals here. So I think a slightly distorted guitar with a little, kind of a lower twang sound to it, and just have a little melody here and there would definitely go a long way with this one.
We can do whatever we want.
So I like it. It's definitely licensable. Energy is good. I think it's a bit long. I think we're kind of repeating a lot of the sections over and over again. Again, this is different from releasing a radio track or just something on social media. We just need to make sure that we give them all these different options and the track moves along. I was definitely at some point going like, okay, I've heard it. I've heard this, you know, just especially in this last 45 seconds of the track. I think you can get this track down to 215, probably 230, and just cut out a little bit of the extraneous stuff, the repeating stuff, and just try to make sure that every section has something new and unique, especially with your vocals, some new lyrics here and there, obviously. And you do that for the most part, just that one repetitive side. So definitely on the right track. I just think a couple of fixes there and that compression stuff, definitely, I think, look into that. But really cool stuff there. All right, and groove. Let's see what you got here. definitely groove. One thing that I'm already noticing, because I even noticed with the title of your track, the mystery becomes clear. I don't picture or feel that any mystery is becoming clear with this track. Like that's not the vibe or the emotion. I don't. It's kind of just a grooving, cool, happy-go-lucky sort of feeling track. So the emotional focus is not here. So I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like you maybe used a reference track. Definitely use a reference track when you start producing, because I think you've got a lot of good sounds here. The horns, not a big fan of that, but almost everything else, your claps, drums, all that kind of stuff, you have some really good samples, some sounds. Obviously, you've got some great musical ideas that you can work with, but you need more focus here. This kind of feels like it's just everything being thrown in there, and it's like, why are we composing this track? What kind of a scene is this going to serve? What purpose is this going to be in? It just kind of feels like a grooving, cool tune. Sometimes you'll find a use for that, but for the most part, you really have to have more of a clear emotional focus, and especially with the title here, it sounds like that's what you were going for. But I'm not seeing any scene where somebody figures something out and then this song plays. It just doesn't match that vibe you're going for. So I think your disconnect here is getting that emotional focus. You got to have that sort of tone and that mood that you put in there. That's what you can do when you go find a reference track that you emulate. So follow in the footsteps of somebody who has that sound, that exact emotional place that you want to go. Kind of strange. We were going for this, driving, and then it just kind of stopped, and now we're doing a more grooving thing. So again, I think all this stuff can be fixed with a reference track. If you follow a reference track, you'll notice they don't do stuff like this. They'll actually have more of a groove. They'll build, then they'll transition to a different section that might have a different beat or a different makeup of percussion and that kind of thing. So that's the stuff that you really need to start getting used to and make that as kind of second habit, like a natural sort of instinct for you when you compose. Okay, let's just groove this, build it, and then we can make a change. But this is kind of like in the middle of a section, we just changed the drums, and it felt a little bit disoriented. Same thing, here we are with these strings, which feel completely disconnected from the rest of the track. I don't know why they're here. They're not really following and telling the story and continuing the story. It just feels like you have the dynamics side of it down, where you have this big part, small part. That's the stuff that you definitely have down, but it's still the lack of focus here. Yeah, get those horns out of there. They sound really fake. They feel very keyboardy, and they're also really dominating in the mix right now. So they definitely, if you were to keep them in, I don't think you should. But even if you replace them, take them down a bit. They're really too dominant right now. Not a bad ending. I think maybe you have one more hit. Dun, 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 dun. Maybe you have a little bit more on that downbeat. So just a subjective thing, but you definitely do have a punchy ending there, which is really good. But yes, emotional focus. I think the musical ideas, you're heading in the right direction. The dynamics, you certainly have that there. With the exception of the horns, yeah, get those out of there. But focus, yeah, this doesn't have a clear direction. So that's definitely something you should be focusing on moving forward. So I'll do one more refresh here, see if we get any last submissions before I wrap this one up. Looks like that's it. Thank you guys so much. Please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about the feedback that I give, if it's useful, if you feel like you can take these suggestions that I give you and put them into action. I want to make sure that you're not wasting your time, I'm not wasting my time, that this stuff really does help you guys improve your productions. I really want to know that stuff. So please don't be shy. Let me know below.